Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. And if you are looking to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today we are doing chapter 65 of Breaking Step. Can you recreate this with your essence? Tibbs asked Dawn as he recreated the pattern he sensed, using light over this floor. The sorcerer studied it, then the floor, tracing one of the line that Tibbs had noticed matched the pattern he'd sensed. You want me to make it within the mess of essence in the floor? Yes, but when I tell you, this is a twin trigger, I'll do the same on the other around the other column. Both need to be done with the same element? Tibbs nodded. It's in part why it triggered the last time. I only used essence on this side of the trigger. What are the odds a team is going to have two runners with the same element? Mez asked as Don stood and moved between the two columns. This feels like something the dungeon set up to make sure we have to fight the creatures. Tibbs looked up, but again he didn't comment. It can be done. Done. Dawn sent essence to the column, then recreated to the other column and recreated the pattern. This is a test of strength and finesse. The pattern became fuzzy and focus. It definitely requires that at this point. I've never had to stretch my attention this far before and maintain it. That's why we're cheating, Tib said, grinning. Why am I not surprised? Ganny commented. How are you going to get the timing right? Jekyll asked, crouched next to the column, hand on the design. We prepare the pattern over where it goes, Don said. Then, when I give the signal, Tibbs continued, we lower it into the lock. Jekyll frowned. How can you tell where the lock is? I can barely tell where my essence is in this mess. You have to find the matching line, Don said, looking at the column and tracing one that followed corruption. Like that's any easier, the fighter said. The dungeon is trying to kill you, the sorcerers replied. The dungeon is trying to kill you, the sorcerer replied. So you shouldn't expect it to make it easy on you. He paused. Although this doesn't seem all that difficult. Do you have any idea what it took for me to work this out? Don asked, outraged. No, since the two of you were shrouded in darkness. Let's remember, Mez said, just how much smarter than the rest of us you are. Even without Tibbs explaining this for me to work out how even without Tibbs explaining this for me to work out how I'd have figured it out, Don replied. Anyone who paid attention would eventually realize the pattern of their essence has a matching line etched into the floor. And once you can sense it, there is a faint trace of the essence stretching to the other column where they'd notice the same thing. How likely is it that once they tell their team's rogue, they'll realize they're in step, Tibbs. Tibbs didn't answer immediately, searching for that trace essence Don mentioned. Then was annoyed at not having noticed it before. Two identical lock with a connection, they'd work it as soon as they're told. As soon as they're told. Hence, Don said, this is somewhat easy for the third floor. I'll always take it easy, Mez said, sounding dubious. Unless it's a fight, Jekyll said, those we should earn. I'll take an easy fight too, the archer replied. Wimp, the fighter said, grinning. We're not all as thick-headed as you, Mez said mockingly. Do you think I missed something in how it works? Tibbs asked Dawn, sensing for anything new. I trust what you worked out, but we should stay alert. The dungeon's too smart not to have something ready. Kenny's chuckle confirmed what Don said. Then we go slow. Tibbs stepped to the other column. I'm making the pattern. He formed it over the matching line on the floor, then essence under it. It's done. Make sure it's correct. Don instructed, and Tibbs breathed the annoyance away. This was done, making sure. It matches, Tibbs replied after checking. Mine too. On your mark, Tibbs, we lower it. On the count of 0, it needs to be in the weave. I'll start at 4. I'm ready. 4, a beat. 3, a beat. 2, a beat. 1. He moved it in as he said 0. It's in, Don replied, then hurried to add as Tibbs sensed that something's happening. You were right. The essence moved around the pattern, and Tibbs couldn't tell what they were doing, but he knew letting go or pulling the pattern out would activate the trigger. When I tell you, Don called, turn the pattern leftward. Leftward a quarter turn. It needs to be fast. Tibbs searched for what he'd sensed, and noticed the corruption alignment. And noticed the corruption's alignment was shifting within itself. Now! Tibbs turned as the corruption moved, stopping as instructed. Stopping as Don called, stop! It's not done, Tibbs said. The essence was still shifting, but now he could sense what it meant. We need to... How was he supposed to describe that motion? Rotate the pattern on an axis aligned with the floor and aim towards the column, Don said. Tibbs had no idea what that meant, other than Don had also worked it out. Only the pattern's going to change as it moves. I don't see... Oh, clever dungeon. Very clever. Alone, I'd be too focused on getting ready for the rotation to notice how the rest of the essence has moved. Oh, and I apologize for not using name. There's something about saying it that makes it too much of a person. Mess finished. Yes, I can't resolve that with what I've been told about of dungeons. It's okay. Yeah, okay, here there's definitely okay. I need to shift things around. There's a set that the urgency is gone here. Okay, let's take this. Let's make it 2. Now, Tibs called. As the essence solidified in place, he rotated it, shifting the corruption to match the indicated. And there's a kept hold of the essence, waiting for something to happen. Okay. I don't want to lose that, so I'm going to have to see if I can bring it back in. This one. Okay. So if I do that, 20%. So, do you think it's done? Don asked. Carefully split his attention to confirm there were no essence remaining around the column, then let go of the corruption and sat down. So it's done. Basically. Okay, so that's going to go here. Yes. Using names. And I can't resolve that with what I've been told of dungeons. So that's still there. It's okay, still replied. That's Tibs sense. Okay. This is no longer there. That was my attempt at keeping the tension there, but it didn't work. Until Tibs, my opinion of runners wasn't particularly high. He was complimenting me, you know. Yes, but the name thing and okay. I lose that. It's all right. This goes away. You know what? I don't need this. Let's see if I can back to that. If uh, creatures. If the other trigger activates. Okay, so let's see if okay. I don't see. Oh, clever dungeon, very clever. Alone, I'd have been too focused on getting ready for the rotation to notice how the rest of the essence had moved. Oh, and apologize for not using names. There's something about saying it that makes it too. Now, it's called cutting off the archer. Now, Tibs called cutting off the archer as the essence solidified in place. He rotated it, shifting the corruption to match the shifting her to match the moving essence. And once the top was in the center of the column, all the essence dissipated as if caught in a breeze. He kept hold of the essence. That's a lot of essence. I don't really like it, but waiting for something to happen. Do you think it's done? Don asked. Tibs carefully split his attention to confirm there were no essences remaining around the column, then let go of the corruption and sat down, panting. So it's done? This one, Tibs replied, standing. 2 more sets of columns means 2 more triggers like this one. And yes, Don told Maz, using name makes it too much of a person, and I can't resolve that with what I've been told of dungeons. It's okay, Stowe replied. Until Tibs, my opinion of runners wasn't particularly high. If the other triggers, okay, I can stick rolls. We'll have to fight just as many creatures? As asked. There's no way to helps if I, there's no way to know without triggering them, Don answered. Which we aren't, Tibs told Jackal, his tone firm. Hey, I'm good with you cheating your way to the dragon. You guys remember Quigley's team beat the boss the hard way, right? Mez asked, sounding odd. We could do it, Jekyll replied dismissively. We aren't, Tibs said. Maybe one of you should do this one with Tibs? Don asked, so you can practice? I'd rather keep my energy for fighting the dragon, Jekyll replied. And I'd rather do them with you, Tibs said. You know what to expect, so it's going to be easier to deal with the way they're going to be different. Then on the next run, one of you is disarming them with Tibs, Don instructed. Jekyll snorted. On the next run, we'll be on the 4th floor. The next trigger had 2 extra steps after aligning the pattern with the column, and the one after that moved much faster, and they nearly triggered it. Tibs was panting when he let the essence go and suffused himself with purity as he straightened. The dragon was no more than the equivalent of 3 sets of columns away now, and it was big. Is that what dragons really look like? Ms. asked. It was a lizard lying on the floor with its back reaching nearly halfway to the ceiling. Its scaled skin was green with a golden sheen to them. Its head, at the end of a serpentine neck, rested on thin forelegs that ended in claws long enough to cut through half a column. Its rear legs were thickly muscled and reminded Tibs of those on a rabbit. It's missing the wing from the one the crest has, Jekyll pointed out. The few times I've come across descriptions of them, Don said, they didn't entirely match. The lizard-like body with scales that have a golden sheen matches this one, as do the long claws. They all agree dragon breathe fire, so this one probably does too. Actually, it's surprising there are so many similarities, since dragons, like all monsters in the wild, started as dungeon-made creatures. Each one should have made something completely different. Dungeons can talk to each other, Tibs said, admiring the dragon. I can? Stowe asked in surprise. Can he? Stone turned suspicious. If that's the case, then it's not as surprising. I don't know where Tibs got that from, she replied. The Purity Dungeon, Tibs said. Val and Craven talked about her having a conversation with another dragon before they went wild. He felt Don's eyes on him. Val's old, Kenny mused. Did they say anything about the relationship between Val and the other dungeon? Tibs pieced what he remembered of that conversation. Pieced together what he remembered of that conversation. Not that I remember, but I did get the impression they were familiar, like with a family. That would be it, Kenny said. Really old dungeons can send a spark of themselves into the world, and if it lands in a place that allows it, it becomes a core. When the dungeon is strong enough, they can speak through that link. Is that how I came about? Is there a dungeon out there I'll be able to talk with at some point? No, Stowe, she said, amused. You're one of the special dungeons who came to be all by themselves. Are those rare? Tibs asked. Quite, Kenny replied. So yes, Stowe, you're going to have to rely on me for information about the others. Dungeon can only talk with their child, he told Don. Dungeons have children? Don asked, incredulous. Except for Stowe, he didn't need anyone. Oh, now he's going to be insufferable about that, Kenny said. Won't you? Don't worry, I will always need you, Stowe replied. Until I point out you are breaking the rules. Bending. Breaking, she stated. I'm learning to be gentle about it, he offered. You do realize that it doesn't matter how gently you don't listen to me. Once the rule breaks, it remains broken. Unless you don't want us to get on with this fight, Tibs said, and ignored the horrified look from Jekyll. You're going to have to continue this elsewhere. We'll pick this up later, Kenny said, glee slipping in her voice. I really want to watch this. That, and the shadows clinging to the dragon, confirms something for Tibs. We need to be careful. Ganny has tricks set up for this fight. Then we hit it hard and fast. Jekyll ran at the dragon. With a sigh, Tibs hurried after the fighter. One day, Mez said, letting loose arrows, he's going to get himself killed with that attitude. The fire spread over the dragon, who didn't seem to notice. We tell Krosef how he rushed the dragon, Don replied, balls of corruption splashing onto the dragon's scale. And it might be today. Instead of seeping into the scale, the shimmering pushed the corruption away. The shimmer is a protection. It might be against more than just corruption and fire. Good thing there's 3 of us who don't require essence to cause damage. Jekyll said halfway to the dragon as it raised its head and blew essence at them. The essence ignited before Tibs grabbed hold of it and engulfed Jekyll. Tibs pulled it away, absorbing enough to refill his reserve and sending the rest at the wall. Did you think that was going to hurt me? Jekyll asked. Tibs burned me with fire hotter than that. Tibs turned to his team, motioning to his intact clothing. How great is that? I learned how to give my clothing the... The large paw hit the fighter leisurely, and Jekyll hit the center of the burn the fireball had left on the wall. The dragon chuckled as it stood on its foreleg and stretched in the way Tibs had seen cats do. Ow! Jekyll got to his feet, and the dungeon motioned him close with a clawed finger. Oh, you're controlling that thing! He rubbed his hands together. This is going to be so fun! He ran at it again. Controlling? Don asked. Stoking into his creatures, Tibs replied, throwing himself out of the way of the paw that came down. He's hoping to kill Jekyll that way. Does it mean we should let the two of them go at it without interference? The sorcerer asked. Tibs sliced at the leg. No. The cut was thinner than he expected. The shimmering had negated a lot of the damage caused by the essence in his ice and metal sword. With Jekyll running under the dragon, Tibs realized the legs were shorter than he'd thought. It roared as Jekyll punched its underbelly, then stepped aside and around, revealing a tail that swept across the floor. Tibs jumped back, and Kumdar scored a hit with his staff as he stepped back that earned him a hiss. Jekyll stayed under it as the dragon moved, punching the underbelly, then kicked a leg that tried to crush him. When the dragon connected, the swipe sent Jekyll all at the wall again, but Tibs caught him in a mass of thick water that plopped him on the floor. How about we fight together this time? Tibs glared at him. That works for... The war made the walls shake, and this time essence responded in them. Something's happening, he called out. Doorways opened on each side of the room, disgorging creatures of all kind. He used water and air to deflect as many of them as he could, but they were so... To deflect them, but there were so many, all running in their direction from both sides. It was impossible to keep them all away. Then Tibs was on the floor from an impact, his head ringing, his concentration broken, and his arm limp. He bashed those within reach with his ice shield and as he got to his feet, wrapping his arm in an essence splint. Purity was out of the question at the moment, with so many creatures passing him, trying to hit him. An etched wave of water with dew pushed some aside, leaving them pierced with water spike, but more crashed over and around them. We need to get out of this, Jekyll called. Tibs used the dragon as a reference and moved away, blasting and bashing any creature he encountered. I'm glad to see you're smart enough to know when we're not going to win, Mez yelled, fire arrows removing creatures from their path. When I end up in this shape, the fighter replied, I know I'm not winning. His stone body was cracked everywhere, and Tibs sensed how the only thing holding the fighter's essence together was a strand of stone. Jekyll's face has a crack through it, from above one ear to under the other, and the halves weren't correctly aligned. Why aren't they following you? Mez asked as Tibs rushed to help Jekyll, suffusing himself with purity to deal with his injuries. I am content with the fact they are not, and will not question the reason, Kumdar said. His robe was cut and bloody, and the essence through the cleric's arm was shattered, but it held strong. He formed a weave of purity large enough to wrap Jekyll in it. Once it moved through the fighter, Tibs turned to Kumdar, wrapping his arm in a weave of its own. Then noticed Mez and Don were injured too. How did you get hurt? He asked, placing weaves of purity on the archers' injuries. They had archers and sorcerers, Don added. Their aim wasn't good, but the numbers of them made it impossible to avoid everything. He sighed in relief as Tibs applied a weave to his thorn side. So there was someone to deal with everyone in that horde. Jekyll worked his arm and jaw, matching them, watching them stand between watching the creatures standing between them and the dragon. It makes sense, Don said. Every fight we've had a mix of all classes, or their creature equivalent. The dungeon has to, since we're just as dangerous to it as the three of you. Are we attacking again? Tibs asked after making sure everyone was healed. No, Jekyll replied after a long silence. Don't be so surprised. They nearly broke me in half, and I don't have enough essence left to hold myself together a second time. Maz, Don, Kumdar, how are your reserve? I'm good, Maz replied. I refilled my bow from that fireball Tibs diverted. I lost a lot of my amulets when they did this to me, he indicated his healed side. I was forced away and the dungeon absorbed them. Without them, I don't know how much use I'll be against the dragon in our next run. I can afford to get more, and even with Tibs refilling those I have left before the fight, I doubt I'll have enough. You won't have to worry about running out of essence during the next run, Tibs says. Carino's robe holds a lot of it. Are you sure, Tibs? Jekyll asked, while Don looked puzzled by the statement. It's not helping anyone at the bottom of the chest, and she'd want our sorcerer to use it. He paused for a few breaths, paying attention to the emotions our memory brought up. Pain and regret weren't as strong as he'd expected. How do you feel about grayish blue? Mez asked. It's not my preferred color, but if it does what Tibs implies... what? I'll just get it dyed. That might be tough to do. Jekyll said. It repairs itself. It might include things like dyes. Still? Tibs asked. The enchantment in it causes it to return to the condition it was when I made it, but if you're sure about letting him have it, changing the color is easy for me to do. Dyeing won't work, but Stowe can change the color for you. Just like that? Don asked, surprised. Tibs grinned. He likes me. Then why do they seem so determined to kill you along with us? You got hurt in that rush, too. I'm a runner. I'm not going to get stronger if he doesn't push me as hard as you. If that means I die because I'm not strong enough. Shrug. I am a runner. You know what? He's not going to die, Jekyll said. He can't. He's the one who came up with the no dying rule. He turned to the dragon. Enjoy this victory. Next time, you are getting broken. And that concludes chapter 65 of Breaking Step. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter is going to be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to listen to the story and the other books in the series, they are up on Royal Road for free. If you want to support me and read ahead of Royal Road, my Patreon is about 20 chapters ahead. And if you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. The links are in the notes, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.